Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. This is the Paletrea Sentinoii eyes. This is actually the second one we did, but we're going to present this one first. So the idea for these guys is that they are kind of the roaming eyes of the organization. They prowl the deserts and keep contact with the different nomadic desert tribes and keep an eye out for troubles from beyond the frontier. Seeing as Palatrea is a trading principality and they maintain their power from essentially being useful to the empire as a hub for trading, so for wealth, and also as a sort of interaction point with the world beyond the western kind of border of the dominion of the dragon throne. These guys are, let's say, they're with the emperor. They're with the conquest, but not of the conquest. Anyway, for their clothing, they're supposed to be the lowest tier of a hierarchy that is funded and kept by the princes of the city, and so they are clad in good armor. But these being the lowest rank, or not the lowest rank, I suppose. They're different. The three different wings of the organization. So these guys are the most lightweight of the Sentinoii. They are armed. In the beginning, the idea was for them to be armed with bow and arrow, but then I came to think of the atlatl, the spear chucker kind of implement. Is actually of kind of Stone Age use, but I still like it, and it's turned out to be a very effective tool, even in later years. And so I figured it'd be kind of useful, these guys being based loosely, at least, off of elements of late Roman military strategy. Romans did like to chuck a good spear around, so I figured that would be kind of fun. And also it does support it is supported by the land around Palatrea, which is kind of this broken up desert landscape. And the ranging would be fairly short, or the range would be fairly short that they would be shooting at. So it makes sense for them to have shorter weapons, but be with a higher sort of deadliness, as it were. The rest of the armor is fairly basic, sort of pads or plates of scale armor around the neck, and then one sort of chainmail vest. No, not plate mail vest around the torso. The rest is lightweight and cloth armor, so that they are mobile and it's not too much to work with, but that they can be protected if they get into a skirmish. The overall stealth element of these guys comes from the cape. So they have a dull side of the cape, and the inner coating of the plate or the inner kind of trim of the cape is made of this material called sea silk, which is a real world material, but that I've given a bit of a twist to. So the idea for them is that the sea silk is dull under normal lighting, under sort of dim lighting, but then under direct sunlight it almost sparkles like gold, and so it has this sort of brilliant effect. And I figured that could be kind of cool for these rangers to have. For example, they could use that to send signals, or to stay hidden if they need to. They can also use it to identify each other, which is probably useful. And of course, looks fancy as hell, which you'd be surprised how important that was in a lot of history. Now, the idea is that they keep these this sort of inside of the cape hidden until the last moment, and maybe like in an ambush, for example, they throw them off to strike fear and horror into the enemy, and then charge them and fling their javelin. The approach for the sketch was pretty simple. You can see in the beginning that I was exploring ideas for having them kind of be more mobile and showing off the moving around and maybe even being in kind of a skirmishing. But then, based on the fact that the sketch for the guardians, the kind of guardsmen, that's a static one. I kind of wanted that to be for all of these the Sentinoii. That they're, I wanted to focus on the costume and the kind of attitude instead of the action. We'll come back to that, of course. But so with as with the other sketches, I was trying to take a lesson from last time and try and deal with my darkest dark shadows, my cast shadows in the line art, and that worked out pretty well in this instance. I do like how it kind of solved a lot more of the light dark problems early on in the process. So by the time I get into color and get into lighting, I got most of my actual problems solved, and all I have to focus on is kind of making it pretty and making sure that the material read comes off. The colors I more or less picked as a drabber version of the guardsmen. These guys are more rangers, more kind of out on the frontier, and so I figured they would have hardier cloth and colors. I also imagine there being a certain amount of scrub trees and deserty pines and whatever. So not like the Sahara in this case, but more of like a blighted land for the frontier. So coming in with the lights, I wanted to keep it simple and consistent with the original guardsmen, and so all I'm really focusing on at this point is to carve out the shape of the shape of the character, trying to pull the forms forward, and trying to show off how everything is sitting in space next to each other. To that end, I almost always draw in a light indicator arrow. I know it seems so rudimentary, and I drew it very poorly, but it's very useful. It helps me out tremendously. This time through the stream, we had a lot of questions about why I work in this sort of heavily layered and very process-centered way. And for me, at least, it saves me a hell of a lot of time, because it forces me to make mistakes early so that they're easy to fix, and then later those same those problems that I come across, I can isolate where they are in the layering, and then I can kind of solve it individually rather than having to paint it all in and out. Of course, if you've committed following problems or following mistakes on subsequent layers, then yeah, you kind of do have to go back and fix that. But for me, at least, that has ended up being more time saving than time consuming. So you can see with like applying the light, I'm trying to get the gold elements to kind of pick out a little bit. In a marching column or in a out on a mission, they would have kind of the capes closed around the armor so as to get as little twinkling as possible. There would still be the cloth of gold trimming, but I imagine that that wouldn't show off from very far away. So I wanted to show like the dullness of the cape versus the golden luster of the armor. That would be bronzed iron scales or bronze scales, depending on which one is heavy. I assume iron scales are probably heavier, so maybe these guys have brazen scales. Either way, pretty useful armor. So at this point, I've kind of got my lights in. I'm trying to adjust so as to not have too much sort of play and luster in the light I put on other things in the metal. I want that to stand out. And also noticing now that, like, okay, I made a couple of lighting mistakes and didn't go quite far enough with some value collections. So I'm pushing those in and making sure that reads well enough. I am at this point starting to think about like the final read and the final clear up. So for my darkest darks, I did decide at one point to like do one darker pass than from the line art. So I've lightened the line art up a little bit, and then in using selections, I've taken the now background color, which is the established darkest dark, and I'm just using that to sort of press forms away from each other. If you can interject a cast shadow between two objects, the eye will automatically kind of make the one that's standing against the drop shadow, it'll push that one out in space. It's very useful for sort of final rendering. So you can see me using that quite extensively in this one, and you'll also see me doing it in the subsequent two sketches you'll see later. The great advantage here is that I get to kind of reestablish all the shapes. I get to reread everything and say like, okay, is this the way it should be? Is this the way I want it to be standing? And if it is, then I keep it, and if not, I can always again peel back, have a look, see if I like what I'm seeing, and push and pull on it. So the decision making process is not over before I agree with myself that it is, essentially. And again, it shows the usefulness of this technique. I don't have to stick with any choice until the end, but I do try to make sure that the choices that I do make are the ones that I'm trying to achieve. Either way, this brings us to the close of the first of the Sentinoii. There are more to come, so I hope you will stick with us and enjoy. Cheers!